All right, welcome back. Radio St. George 100.3. Kelly Kendall here with you, and Ruben, we're so excited to have you again.
Kelly, it's always good to see you. Always good to chat with you. How you been?
Ruben Garcia, you've been around St. George a long time. How long have you been here?
I'm thinking 26 years now.
26 years, and you just like it so much you stay.
You know, I don't know if you saw the news earlier today, but a lot of people are cold all over the place, right? And I'm just so excited to live in this place.
You like the sunshine?
The sunshine's awesome.
60 degrees in the wintertime.
Can't beat it.
Awesome. I think one of the things you enjoyed actually is raising children here in St. George.
That's what brought us here.
Yeah, talk about that for a minute. Why would you want to raise kids in St. George?
Well, so my two oldest sons were born in Salt Lake, and Salt Lake's good. Salt Lake's a good place to raise kids and raise a family. And then found myself in Southern California where I grew up and had my third son there, and just decided that Orange County, Southern California wouldn't be the greatest place to raise kids, and didn't really want to go back to the cold, frigid weather up north in Salt Lake. And so St. George was a good compromise, and it's been great.
Well, we do have palm trees, right? It's 60 degrees. When it's 60 degrees in the wintertime, it reminds you that it will be pretty warm in the summer. You can take the heat okay, I'm sure.
The heat doesn't bother me, really.
What about the heat of being a dad?
The heat of being a dad, yes, it used to bother me. Big challenge. But today, it's a big difference. Of course, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the fact that the kids are grown up and pretty much on their own. But once a dad, always a dad, right?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's like being a mom, you know. My cute little 83-year-old mother, I go to visit her, and she'll remind me to wear a jacket when it's cold or ask if I'm hungry. Same as being a dad, right? So, interesting enough, let's talk, we talked about the heat just for a second, the heat here in St. George, but most men, we operate about 211 degrees as a metaphor, and that's why there's road rage, there's why we blow up at our children, and it has nothing to do with the Lego that you just stepped on the living room floor, even though that's painful.
Very.
It's really about what you're carrying on your shoulders. Talk to us about fatherhood and the weight of carrying around financial responsibilities, being a provider, being a protector, presider.
Those are heavy burdens, heavy responsibilities. But here's the thing: I don't know about you, Kelly. I don't know about people that are listening, but when I was growing up, being a provider seemed to be the primary focus, the main emphasis. And so that's what I knew. And when the kids started coming along, being a father and everything that's involved with raising kids and being a father was really, if I'm being frank, was pretty foreign to me. I could go out and work and earn income and do fairly well at that. But when it come to being a dad and having those responsibilities, I flew by the seat of my pants.
Well, we learn how to be a father from our father and from our grandfathers and father figures and different ones. And you've shared some of that in the past. But so, there's a lot of weight to carry around just to provide. If you looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, and the bottom level is food, water, shelter, right? And then you have safety, and then you have friendship and love and self-actualization, all the things that go along that. But just the basics. They say nowadays in 2019 it costs about $248,000, almost $250,000 to raise a kid to 18 years old.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. When you think of it in those terms, I'd sit here and wonder how does a father, or how does a mother and a father together, how do they face that and not feel stress, not feel that pressure, that angst And yeah, that all that pressure and that anxiety, it all reveals itself a lot of times in how we are towards our children.
You ever feel like a volcano just kind of erupts at the least expected time, and it has nothing to do with what's going on? It's the straw that breaks the camel's back, right?
It is, Kelly. I'm not going to share the story, but I had an personal experience where, yes, thankfully that really doesn't happen today, but I've absolutely been there, and man, it was scary. What happened years ago when my youngest was maybe 3-4 years old was scary.
Well, that's pretty amazing. We all have memories of those. It's pretty amazing that we survived
Yeah.
us growing up, let alone, I mean, you think about the way things have changed. Isn't it amazing, really, when you think about from when our grandparents to our parents, now to us, and now our children, raising children, our grandchildren, makes you kind of wonder what they're going to face in the future. So, intergenerational, we're going to talk a little bit about intergenerational incarceration, intergenerational poverty. A lot of social ills are passed on from generation to generation, unfortunately, and we're going to talk about some of the statistics. For example, one of the classes that you and I teach in the jails, in the prison system, we have state inmates as well, is Inside Out Dad, and the issues many times comes from them not having a dad or having a bad experience with a dad. And so, like, for example, that's just one of the statistics that we'll share is if you have a parent that is incarcerated, you are 6 times more likely to go to jail yourself. That's pretty staggering. For a father to face, that means somebody in jail that you're teaching right now, if they're facing wanting to be a dad, wanting to be engaged and try and help them, because they always say they don't want their kids to turn out like them. They want them to do better. They don't want them to go to jail. They don't want them to have that experience. They're going to have to work 6 times harder. Is that what you're saying? Is that what that means? They're going to have to work 6 times harder so that they won't have that effect. That effect won't be in place.
I'd say it's probably higher than 6 times. One of the things that I really enjoy about working with the participants in the jails is that I get to challenge their thinking a little bit, because a lot of them have thinking that's stinking, if that makes sense.
Stinking thinking.
Stinking thinking, yeah. And a lot of them are caught up in those generational patterns, and it doesn't dawn on a lot of them that they can be that. They could be that change agent for not just for their own family, but for their family for generations, if that's something that they choose to do. And a lot of them, I don't think have really thought about that. A lot of them have a difficult time thinking past, the next drink or the next who knows what.
Well, what about you and me? I mean, did you think about it when you had a kid? Did you think that if you're raising this child is going to affect generation after generation after generation? It never entered my mind, honestly.
As a young father, Kelly, it never entered my mind as well, but it's heavy on my mind almost on a daily basis today. And it's, I think a lot about legacy, and I'm sure, Kelly, you do the same.
Absolutely.
Because I definitely want my children, their children, and beyond to understand more than anything the importance of family and how we need to fight. We need to fight for each other and fight for our families, so they can have at least something that we have today, if not something better. Sure,
I think we all want it to be better, for sure. But you look at the world that's going on. I mean, there's a lot of things we're facing, and we're facing on a daily. It seems like it's increasing. And let me just throw a couple out there and have you share some thoughts about it. For example, that we actually have a fatherhood crisis in America, and that's not a secret. In fact, 24 million children are being raised in America without their biological father in the home. I think, I don't know how many million now. There's, various statistics about that. that have a parent in jail or have had a parent in jail. 1.7 million is the latest one I saw. But what about just you look at poverty, for example, one of the statistics is it's 4 times more likely to be in poverty if your father's not there, not present, if they're not involved, if they're absent, if you will. Let me throw a couple out there and then we can talk about it. What about this one? 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen without a father in the home. That's a scary thought.
Staggering.
Yeah, it's crazy. More likely to have behavioral problems, and then the last one we'll talk about, and then in this, for a minute, is more likely to face abuse and neglect. I mean, these are tough things to talk about. So poverty, becoming pregnant as a teen, behavioral problems, and abuse and neglect, all of those, the numbers are way high without a father being in the home.
Never thought about those things when my kids were little, when I was a young father. Those statistics that you cited, and they've been around for a while now, they never entered my mind. I like to think that I did some good things, and I was doing as best as I knew how. And I tell you, I just feel so grateful that things today thus far that have turned out the way they have with my kids. They've all graduated high school. They've all been to college or in college. And I'm not saying that because it's something that I did or didn't do. I'm just grateful that they're there doing the things that they're doing and progressing, because it's difficult out there. Those statistics that you cited, and there's so many other societal ills that many people can face. And if they don't have some clear-cut direction on life and expectations and how to treat people and just how to get along, they're going to have a tough time.
Absolutely. So let's just talk. Can we just talk about you for a second? Were you a first-generation college graduate?
I was.
And what about your children?
So, it's funny you ask. I was just thinking about that just the last few days. So
it's a good example right here.
Yeah, my children, out of all of my nephews, nieces, my sons are the only ones thus far that have received college degrees.
Did you encourage them? How did they feel that was important? Did you talk about it? See, it's interesting. It kind of rubs off, right? We're in this environment of our family, our culture, and then of course of our personality, but what motivates us to do certain things. But in reality, I'm assuming you really did talk about it. You maybe even let them know it might be an expectation.
Kelly, we did talk about it and share just a real quick funny story. My oldest son, who's 36 now, I hope he's not listening.
I hope he is listening, actually.
When he was 7, 8 years old, I remember talking to him about, but what he thought he might want to do as he got older. And very, very frank, matter of fact, he looks me in the eye and said, "Dad, I want to be a game show host."
Did he say which one? Did he? The Price is Right. Didn't you always want to do The Price is Right?
I'm kind of partial to. I'm not going to say because I'm going to date myself, right?
What about Family Feud? I mean, that's a
yeah. I like Family Feud a lot. In fact, we watch that probably way too much.
Well, the host, what's his name? He actually is quite funny himself.
Steve Harvey, yeah.
Yeah, Steve Harvey.
But he ended up being an attorney, so I guess maybe that's a form of a game show host.
Depends on what's going on in the courtroom at the time. It could be a biggie. Let's jump into these next ones. Can we just look at a couple of others real quick?
You bet.
2 times greater risk of infant mortality. That's a biggie. 2 times more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. And of course, these numbers, statistics about these societal ills really are from the being absent in the home, the father being absent, not just if they're incarcerated, because we're going to talk about the inside-out dad in a minute, but
okay.
More likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, more likely to go to prison 6 times. 2 times more likely to suffer obesity. What about that? Obesity is an issue with the dads not home. Does that mean that they're being lazy? I mean, that's, a lot of pressure on mom if she's just being a single mom. And in Utah, the law tends to favor that for, probably good reason. But if you get a divorce in Utah and you have children, the physical custody generally goes to the mother unless there's abuse or neglect or something like that. And that's, you look at those dynamics of not having the dad there, that maybe maybe there's some discipline missing. I don't know. I mean, the mother has to be mom and dad, and no faulting her at all, but that's a biggie. What about more likely to commit a crime, or 2 times more likely to drop out of high school?
Yeah, Kelly, those are all again very, very disturbing, and again, there's others, but that obesity one is, as you were talking about that. I remember growing up that my father in my early years spent quite a bit of time with us outside playing ball, teaching us how to throw the football, how to throw the baseball, and I'm not so sure that happens as much today. A father. And a mother, right? If the father's absent, that's something that they really need to be intentional about and really, really look at that, because I have great memories of my father going out and teaching us how to do those things. And growing up in Southern California, I mean, being outside was the thing to do. That was the place to be. And I just think again, fathers and mothers, they're so distracted and fragmented and so involved in doing life's busy, and there's got to be an intentionality about taking that time to take the kids out and take them hiking or whatever, anything outdoorsy that's gonna get them active and doing some stuff.
I think you're right. We used to ride our bikes. I don't know about you. I'm assuming you rode your bike every day after school, and you were just going and playing and digging huts and making forts and playing sports. I remember you talking about playing basketball with friends, and that's how you got, that part of that was changing your life, right? With the friends you played with. We could talk about that a lot. Those are big statistics, but we just have a few minutes left. I really want to focus on Inside Out Dad. You teach that, I teach that. There's 12 core lessons. In prison, we do 2 5-hour sessions. 5 2-hour sessions. And we talk about a range of things with these dads. Let's just kind of go through them. What does it mean to be a man? That's a biggie. What has been your experience with this particular topic? What does it mean to be a man? How do they see themselves, their self-portrayal or self-concept, even of being a man, when they have a father or when they don't have a father?
Well, Kelly, for me, a big part of being a man is being willing to take responsibility for your thinking, for your choices, for your actions. And sadly, many of the inmates that I've experienced, that I've worked with, they're not at that place where they're willing to take responsibility and stand up and just take it, right? We all make mistakes, we all falter, but some of these men that are in the jail, they're not willing to take responsibility for the things that they think, the things that they say, the things that they do. And for me, I think that's a big part of being a man.
Well, we ask the questions, what does it mean to be a man? And sometimes we'll have them report back different comments, and the way they think is the descriptors that they use, to be tough, or what is yesterday's man versus today's man? Because it looks very different. And actually, it appears to be becoming more weak. I mean, look at the sitcoms, look at the primetime TV. It makes men look like a piece of furniture. They're weak. They're not needed. And there's lots of parts and pieces to that would make that philosophy or theory in the world kind of going this direction. But you think of John Wayne, or the tough guy, that somebody plays sports, or somebody that's, you know, a cowboy, or I don't know, just yesterdays, right? My grandpa used to go down to the fields, Washington fields, and haul hay all day before there was a bridge, and he would drag his wagon with horses through the Virgin River, and he'd be gone all day, and then come home, and then go back and do it the next day. And the whole purpose was to be a provider, right? So to, you know, when we talk about the role, so let's go into what does it mean to be a father compared to being a man. So the role, when we talk about roles of the mother and the father, and the roles of, you know, manhood and womanhood in the family, how do they differentiate between nowadays with motherhood and fatherhood in the roles? What do you see? How do you see that?
You know, I think there's a lot of fathers there again that that they believe their primary role is to be that provider, and I think they place a lot of expectations on the mother to do almost everything else. It's as I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's difficult out there. You come home from a hard day at work, and you're tired and you're beat up, and you know, doing things with your children, doing things with your family is probably for a lot of dads, it's probably the low on the list of priorities. And you know, it's again one of those things I believe where you have to be intentional, and it's something that write it down if you need to. I mean, you know, make it a priority. Well, if you look at the statistics, it just stares you right in the face that, hey, your kids, they need you in their life. They need. I like what you talk about a lot, Kelly, about, you know, how do our children spell love, and it's true. You know, they want our time. They don't really want the Xboxes and the toys and whatever. They just want to be with Dad and hang out with Dad. I'm sure you've probably seen that video with that little boy, right, where he asks his dad, "Hey, Dad, you know, how much do you make when you work?" And you know, and the dad was kind of offended that his son asked that question, but he wanted to buy some, you know, he wanted to pay his dad for some time, and you know what? And that's a pretty big wake up call.
Absolutely. I mean, you ever think about when you were a kid, I had the best memory of playing Pac-Man. That was like your favorite memory of all time. Well, no, it's your memories of your family and your, you know, those, even whether it be a fishing trip or hiking or whatever, going and doing things. It's the relationship memories that we have. Unfortunately, video games and things and cell phones are becoming so addictive. It's taking over. We have just 2 minutes left. What about emotions? Let's just talk quickly about emotions. So, do you think men are okay with sharing emotions?
You know, not generally. Maybe a little bit more today than, say, 15, 20 years ago. But it's just, again, if it's not something that was modeled for us as kids, the chances are, you know, that you know, we're not going to be willing to be that vulnerable.
You learn it by watching, don't you? I mean,
absolutely.
I love the saying, "What you do screams so loud I can't hear what you say." And so, did you model emotions? Was that something that you see that your kids mimic you? Are they mini me's?
You know, to some degree. I mean, I like to think and feel like I showed my emotions in front of my kids. I still do. But you know, I think a lot of males, a lot of men, a lot of young men, you know, when they think about showing emotions, expressing their emotions, that's not being a man.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting as we wrap up here. Emotions is a big deal. The worst thing, in fact, most men, if you say one word, what is it we don't want to be or appear in any way? Weak. We don't want to be weak. Well, Ruben, our time's up. It goes so fast every time we get together. Thank you for being on Radio St. George 100.3 FM.
Thank you, Kelly. And just real quick, one of the greatest stories I've heard you share that maybe you can share another program is that pickleball story.
The pickleball. We'll do that next time.
All right, Kelly.
Thanks for being with us. Radio
thanks
St.
for
George
having me.
100.3. Kelly Kendall, Ruben Garcia. Glad to be with you.
Have you not shared the pickleball story on the radio?